can Batman still be that creature of fear if he's sharing his legacy with all of these other characters? Does it make him too familiar? Is he turning himself into a brand? And by doing so, is he diluting the effect of what he can do for Gotham?
Welcome back to Thinking Critical. This is Wes, and today we're going to talk something real positive. Last time I had Larry Bernard on the channel, we talked about some of Tom King's writing issues, and today we're going to talk about a different writer, more proficient at using all of his tools in the comic book trade. How you doing, Larry?
I'm doing great. And we talking about Brian Michael Bendis, and I haven't really read a lot of Brian Michael Bendis, and I was like, well, I want to dip into Bendis, do I want to pick up the trade of Naomi, and I was like, no. When you do YouTube videos, there's the SJW stuff, is this finally the end for Kathleen Kennedy stuff? If you do a lot of that content for a while, eventually your brain just says, can we not talk about that anymore? And that's why I came up with this. Hey, let's talk about why Bryan Hill is great.
So I've read a lot of Bryan Hill's comic books, and one of the things I've really noticed, he's got a really firm grasp on the three-act structure. He's really good at incorporating character voices and history and character traits into the story. He doesn't tend to veer out. He'll add on stuff, but he never tries to really detract from the character. What it is about Bryan Hill's writing that makes you think that he's so refreshing in the comic industry today?
What I want to say about Bryan Edward Hill's writing is a lot of people talk critically about how people are writing to make a cheap and easy flip show into streaming services. Bryan's writing for streaming shows. Of course, if you've watched Titans, he's writing for Titans. He actually did an episode of the anime Cannon Busters. He wrote on that. So Bryan knows what it is to write for television, and that's what he's doing in his comics. Take Batman and the Outsiders as a perfect example. The amount of use of Batman as a character in the show is he's the big star you pay for. Like Henry Cavill in The Witcher is an example. He wasn't really in a lot of the sequences there. There was a lot of stuff involving the other characters. So the Batman and the Outsiders, if you turn that comic series that he's doing right now into a TV show, you're Bruce Wayne, you're Batman. That's the big star you pay in for a semi-cameo kind of role. And then you can pay all the other actors a little bit less who are doing the heavier lifting for the show. And you look at how every character's time on the screen is structured, it's using that sort of sensibility. But where other writers, when they're trying to make a comic book to flip lazily into a streaming service show, they're thinking about the limitations of the medium. Bryan, when he's writing this way, he thinks about all of the strengths of comic books as a medium. You don't have to worry about budget. You don't have to worry about settings. You don't have to worry about, do I got the money to make the special effects work? And that enables him to tell really compelling stories that feel like television, feel like movies.
Yeah, it's really expertly done, serialized storytelling where, everything fits into a bigger story, but you never feel like you didn't get a story when you're done reading, a Bryan Hill comic book. At least that's how I feel when I'm done with them.
Absolutely. And another great thing about his writing style is Bryan tends to write a lot of comic books where things like Batman are connected to other people's work. And he always takes the opportunity to not only upsell the other guy, help set up the other guy when his little short run on a story is over, so the next guy can run with something compelling. If there's things that somebody else isn't addressing related to the character, he takes that opportunity to kind of segue that into the stories he's telling. So, like we were talking about before we started the live stream, in Batman and the Outsiders, there was a scene where Clark and Bruce were talking, and they're like going, hey, Clark, what the heck? You revealed your secret identity. You realize how that's going to screw me later, right?
Yeah, it's one of the weird things with DC Comics right now. It feels like there's no continuity. Every character is, in 4 different places at once, and you have big things, Alfred being, murdered in the regular Batman series, and you don't see the character being affected, even though it's supposed to be the same version of the character. But Bryan Hill, ably crafts it and puts it into a storyline because he knows it needs to be addressed because there are people that are reading all the Batman stories.
But also, and we'll talk about another series in a moment, but the Batman and the Outsiders is just such a great example. If you're not reading it, you really should be. his Batman is an interesting new take on Batman. He's Batman as the CEO leader, but not the like distant CEO, the hands-on CEO who mentors his subordinates and tries to bring them up and has those subordinates bring up the new up-and-coming heroes and is invested in that process. So that Batman, his father dying, that's something that he needs to address. That Batman, his best friend kind of making life hard for him, that's something you have to address to make that character real, make the whole thing believable.
Yeah, and I also, one of the other things I like about him, it doesn't so much flow in exactly what we're talking about, is his willingness to create new villains. It feels like everybody wants to reprocess and reuse the same villains because they're tried and true and everyone's used to them. Everyone likes the Joker. But he's willing to go out there and make a new villain called Karma, in Detective Comics, and he's bringing a whole lot of he's creating new lore in Batman, which I love originality. I want originality. It's something that is missing in comics today.
But what else is great is he's willing to have villains be a villain. And let's go to that excellent Killmonger series. Like, a lot of people love the Killmonger character from the movie because he was an anti-hero or an anti-villain, depending on your perspective on that character. But he's like saying, no, Killmonger was a bad dude who did bad things, and he did bad things for bad reasons. And he was willing to invest in that, but also make the character compelling and make his fall a compelling story to read.
Yeah, Killmonger was excellent. It really added so much to the character from the movie and really sets him in motion. And you could just see another thing that Bryan does really well is incorporates his influences into his storytelling. Oh, yeah. And you can see that he is a big influence in it. It's really right front and center in Killmonger. It makes the story that much cooler the way he incorporates that.
But what I loved about the Killmonger story so much is you could see it in the first episode. Bryan Killmonger is I'm the smartest person in the room. But in that initial conflict with the Kingpin, it shows the difference between being an intelligent person and being a smart person. And Killmonger, at the beginning of this story, he's just a smart person. He doesn't become an intelligent person until the very end.
Yeah, his naivety kind of gets the best of him. It allows him to get screwed over a couple times. And then by the time you get that final issue, there's no more naive, bad guy. He's full on supervillain and he's taken no prisoners. It's such a good conclusion to a story.
And the other big series that I wanted to highlight on is his Angel series that he's doing, where he's basically taking the classic character of Angel and the Angel TV series and the related lore and mythology, and he's putting a fresh coat of paint on it. And we see terrible things like Thundercats Roar and Woke She-Ra. And he's showing how you can take something, update it, be true to the original source material, and make a compelling story and make compelling characterizations.
Yeah, Angel's interesting because I did watch the TV show a little bit. It just never really caught me. But Bryan Hill's on a Angel comic book. Went and got the first issue, and I've been hooked ever since. And he's doing a lot of really cool things. He's doing it with his X-Men series as well, where he's incorporating technology. These new things that we're all experiencing as far as social media and how they can negatively affect your lives. And he's adding things to it where the first demon that Angel encounters in the book is basically using social media to get a hold of victims and to transform them. It was just really expertly done. And he's doing the similar thing with Overclock and Fallen Angels.
Exactly. And I've not been super duper in on all the new stuff with the X-Men, but I got Fallen Angels because of Bryan Hill.
Yeah, he also he's done a lot of work with Image, Top Cow specifically. I've read Romulus, which is heavily inspired by the Star Wars trilogy. Lots of hands being chopped off, stuff like that. But two of the Top Cow series that really show his storycraft and how he's able to do awesome sci-fi work is Cyber Force and Aphrodite 5. I was just blown away by the storytelling he was able to incorporate those as well, where he takes an existing property that maybe isn't new and fresh right now, but he kind of restructures it. He makes it ready for today's audiences.
And I think a lot of his influence for cyberpunk comes out of how grounded he is in Los Angeles, the city he lives in right now, which is such a iconic cyberpunk setting, and there's still buildings that are out there and functional in LA that are part of that world. But also, he comes from St. Louis, and St. Louis is a pretty gritty city. So he really has a good real world grounding in settings that really draw from that experience.
Yeah, he really does. He incorporates so much cool iconography, and like I said, he's from St. Louis. I'm personally from Kansas City, so we talked a little bit about Missouri and things like that before, on social media. And that's kind of the last thing that I want to talk about, Bryan. His writing is first rate. It's unfortunate he's going to take a little break right now so he can do some TV work.
Yeah, he's got a Guy Pearce movie he's working on called Zone 414. Which I'm guessing, based on the cyberpunk influences he's had in some of his comic writing recently, is probably going to be what that's all about.
It's really exciting seeing Bryan get these opportunities. I don't know that he's going to be long for the comic book world. The pay in Hollywood's going to be a lot better. But, he really does have a great feel for comic books. But another thing he has a great feel for is connecting with his audience, his online presence using social media, to promote his book and connect with readers is second to none in the industry. He doesn't agree with, he's not a yes man. He doesn't agree with everything everyone says, but he's always polite. He's always respectful, and he's always willing to engage, until you're rude to him, and then, he'll walk away. But what do you think about the way that Bryan uses social media to interact with his customers? So
I became a fan of Bryan Hill because of his social media thing, and that's when I started to dive into and read his work. I haven't actually gotten into his Top Cow stuff because going through old back issues, I don't have the bankroll for that right now. But before Batman the Outsider started, he asked a question on Twitter like saying, hey, people who are fans of comics and manga, what do you like about comics and manga? Like, what do you like about one? What do you like about the other? What do you like about both? And he's taken those influences and he's seeded that into Batman and the Outsiders. You can see a lot of the manga influences that have been deployed in the artwork. And as I've gotten to know him a little bit better, I've learned things from him about why creative people in the industry never say, man, that Star Wars movie is terrible in public. Because they understand what it's like to be creative. You're throwing your heart and soul and your blood, sweat, and tears into things. And from his perspective, he might have to be in a room someday with that person going up for the same job. And he doesn't want to have that person say, man, Bryan Hill trashed me on social media back in the day, blah, blah, blah. So he's trying to be positive so he can be the person in the room pitching the really great ideas and bringing really great entertainment out to the audience.
Yeah, I wish more creators, in all of entertainment would look at Bryan Hill in the way that he's, fostering an audience, the way he interacts with people, because it's just so refreshing. It's so easy to jump on social media and just be snarky and rude, or somebody comes at you with an attitude to give it right back. But it's really refreshing. There's other people, Scott Snyder, Sean Gordon Murphy, Blake Northcott, that take the same approach, and it's really it really elevated my respect. And it's one of the reasons I went back and bought back the issues of Romulus and made sure I read Cyberforce and Aphrodite 5 and some of his other works.
And something else that I say it's going to be a shame when he's not doing comics, though I imagine he's always going to dip in here and there for a miniseries. Because I'm sure Marvel will offer him the money every now and again once he gets bigger to say, hey, can you come back and do like a miniseries here, a miniseries there? Heroic characters matter in his stories. Villainous characters matter in the stories. And the interplay between the two. Because those are important, fundamental parts of storytelling for thousands of years. And he recognizes the value of those characters, those stories, and how they allow you to go into even deeper stories. American Carnage, for example, does a lot of that stuff, but it has a lot of artsy fluff around the outside edges. There is a story there about a man going on a heroic journey. Just it added some extra flavor in there to be kind of artistic to the direction that Vertigo was going in at the time.
Another thing he's really good about, he always... The hero always suffers something. Like he's never overpowered. He never just powers through and defeats everybody. He always, there's a lesson to be learned. There's an obstacle to overcome before he eventually wins. And the hero always wins, which is really important. Some comic writers don't get that nowadays, but if you don't overcome anything, you never really did it. As far as heroic works go, you didn't really do anything. And I think it's nice that he always puts something in there where the hero is overcoming an obstacle.
Right. And that helps the audience relate to the character because we all struggle. We may not have to fight, a monster that can throw planets at us, but we all have to struggle, go through something, and through that process come out of it stronger. And that's why these kind of stories matter and why we need people like Bryan Hill writing comics. And we do to a certain extent. You see, Sean Gordon Murphy is a guy who writes good comics well, but the comic book industry doesn't know how to take these people and lead with them. And that is a real shame. Like, the biggest negative on Bryan's career is he very rarely has an artist who really highlights his stories and the art that really takes the story to the next level. That's the biggest drawback he's had in his career, is he's never really had the artist to take his work to the next iconic visual level.
This is a great talking about Bryan Hill. When you said you want to talk about Bryan Edward Hill on the channel, absolutely. He's one of my favorite writers. He's a breath of fresh air, in an industry of where everything seems to be the same thing over and over, and there's a lot of negativity. He's a bright, shining light and someone I really admire, and I'm glad that he's moving on, or he's getting more opportunities in Hollywood. Is there anything you wanted to say before we sign off?
Yeah, I hope to do more of these, and hopefully next time, hopefully this does as well as our last video collaboration, and we can come up with something else where we're both passionate, we both want to talk about something, and it's something that can focus on the good in comics, as well as every so often focusing on don't write a giant wall of text. Don't have America Chavez flying away and having Kate Bishop spend like 3 paragraphs talking in a single comic book panel. Don't do that.
I am more than willing to talk about creators and series and stories that I love. The comics is a passion of mine. I know comics is a passion of yours as well as writing. So I know you like talking about these creators and the good things that they've done. And we're definitely going to have to do it again, Larry. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you very much.
If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like. I would appreciate it very much. It helps us attract more views for the channel. Subscribe for future commentary, comic book news, and reviews. And don't forget to ring the bell for notifications. If you want to talk comics, movies, and much, much more, you can follow me on Twitter at Wes_from_TC. With that, Salamat Po, and I'm out.